So if we actually physically compare the guitars, then I'll just get it from here. There's my strap on it now. You'll see that this guitar is slightly darker. It's a difference that we will correct in the production models. Of course, you see that the pickups are a little bit more aged, and this one has a big dent in it, the bridge pickup. Of course, we didn't want to dent the original, or the pickups of the production models, because that would probably harm the guitar. The aging is a little bit more extensive, but very well copied. Not sure if you can see that. And then also on the original, the back is a little bit more brown, and the prototype is a little bit more red. So we are also correcting this in the production models. And of course, you see here the 120th anniversary logo, which is actually, I think, much more stylish than the 2013 logo that they did. So technically, you can see, for instance, here are the same sort of dents and scratches, and also on the front you can see that they're very, very similar in appearance. But the most striking comparison, or the things that are alike, is of course the neck, because it was measured so secure, so accurately, that it's literally the same feel. And of course the weight, because this guitar is almost 3.8 kilos, which is very low for a Les Paul. I mean, Les Pauls vary from, let's say, if you have a really, really light one, from I'd say 3.6, 3.7, the lightest that I've ever seen, until almost 5 kilos. If you have like a late 70s Les Paul, these especially customs, I mean, they're horrible in weight. So this is also very light. It's 3.9, so it's actually 90 grams difference, what I measured on a very exact scale. And the nice thing about weight with these guitars, I'll just put back the original in this case, is that a lot of people don't know why this is. Because why does Gibson make lightweight and heavy guitars? Well, let's say in the 70s, in the Norlin period of Gibson, my personal opinion is that they didn't care too much about what they produced. They just wanted to make money, and the companies that owned Gibson then were just focusing on that. How can we make a guitar cheaper? So they started making 3-piece bodies, 3-piece tops, 3-piece necks, pancake bodies, with the layer in the middle. Of course, this is much more, it's much cheaper to produce. The originals, of course, are 1-piece and of course 2-piece tops, but this is just for the visual appearance that they are 2-piece tops. Of course, 1-piece necks, and this is a major difference in guitar making. So the guitars that they produce now, the new ones, this one, in this case, this is then aged, but also a new 2013 or 14 Les Paul Custom Shop, is actually the same guitar. There are only, I think, 1 or 2 minor differences that they made in the 50s. So my strong conviction is that these guitars will be just as good, in 30, 40, 50 years time. So for one, it's a good investment. But second is, it's just the best that you can get right now, without spending 20, 30, 40 or more thousand euro on a guitar. Why not get a custom shop? I mean, it's really, if you compare, I dare you to come here and compare a normal Gibson or a used one from the 70s or 80s, and then use it and try a Gibson custom shop. It's there's really a lot of difference. But back to the weight. This thing about weight is, if you have the same tree, let's say it's a 50-year-old tree, let's say it's 10 meters high, then you can actually have a difference of weight. Say a body made from the top of the tree could be 3 times as light as the one from the bottom. So they might have similar tone and can be great wood, because the wood is in itself can be great, but it's also important. So how is it dried? How is it harvested? How long did it remain in the same position? How was it shipped? All these things matter. And of course at Gibson they get really a lot of wood in, and then of course they select. So Custom Shop has the first pick, so they obviously for a guitar like this or any comparable guitar, they would select wood that is the same sort of weight, in this case very lightweight. The reason they chamber guitars, actually the Custom Shop does not chamber guitars. If they do, it's on special request, and they will have CR in front of the serial number, meaning chambered reissue. So if you buy a Gibson Custom Shop, it will be, not a hollowed out guitar. Then again, I'm not saying that hollowed out guitars are inferior. They just sound different. So if you want a Les Paul, in my opinion, you should get a solid piece of wood. And so they hollow out the more heavy pieces. And they are good guitars, but they are just not the same as the solid ones. So I would prefer a solid guitar, but I've played chambered or let's say weight relieved guitars, as they say, that are very good. But it's not the same as a solid guitar. Okay, pickups. Yeah, interesting subject. These are actually the Alnico 3 version, the Custom Bucker. Custom Bucker is a Alnico 3 because this resembles the old pickups that often have very low output, like 7 or 8 ohms, or any value in between. Much lower output than, for instance, modern pickups like the Marzio or whatever. So they are generally higher up there. The whole point is that a lot of these vintage instruments like this one have low output and therefore have a lot of headroom. So if you plug it into an amp, if you turn the volume down, it will really be very clean, although the amp might be in overdrive. And if you turn up the volume, it really starts to scream. So you have a very larger palette actually than with a high output pickup. So you can do more things. The previous Gibson humbucker that they used for a lot of custom shops, of course, are the burst buckers. And these were Alnico 2s, which have a medium output. But I prefer this because it's very open, very clear sounding, almost glassy, sometimes like a telly. But it can roar like an Explorer or something like that, like a heavy output pickup. So, but listen to Julian Suss playing, and you will know why. It's a great pickup. Well, yeah, the difference between 2, 3, and 5 Alnico pickups or magnets that make up the pickups. As I said, there's a lot of stories and a lot of marketing, but I heard from Edwin Wilson himself that he actually called factories that make Alnico magnets, and he said, well, Gibson ordered a certain batch of Alnico magnets, let's say Alnico 2s in a certain period. Did they actually get these, or why are the differences so great sometimes? And they said, well, it's very likely that they received a mix of 2 or 3 or 5 Alnicos, and they would just be mixed. So of course they made the bobbins separately, and then they would match, or they would sort of put 2 bobbins in the same pickup, and they could be very different in value, or even the windings could be different, because in the early, let's say the 58 and 59, they used these pickup winders that didn't have an automatic stop to it. So they would wind over 2,000 windings, for instance, and later on they would get winders that would actually stop at 2,000. So then they became more consistent. But it's actually sort of a coincidence how these pickups came together. So it's really hard to duplicate in that sense that they were very scattered. They were very all over the place. Some were like 7 ohms, and some might be 8.8 ohms. And of course, there's also the deterioration of the magnet, so they became weaker in all these years. That's also a factor. So that's a nice story about pickups. Okay. Well, the difference between what Gibson did in 2013, they changed a lot on the guitar, on the custom shop guitar. So they changed the color, of course, the aniline dye, which is actually going to fade. So in 10 years, this guitar is going to look different in the back than if they would use the normal dyes. Of course, they changed the color of the binding, and one of the most important things and the biggest difference actually in sound between a 2012 or earlier and a 2013 or later guitar would be that they changed the truss rod. And people ask me, why didn't they make the right truss rod before? And there's a very simple answer to that. They never had the exact measurements of that 58, 59, 60 truss rod, because they didn't have any neck that they could, because they're very valuable. You can't just break a neck to take out the truss rod. So I think somewhere in 2011 they received a broken neck from a 59, and they took out the truss rod, and then they had the exact measurements, because before they had a slightly thicker truss rod, and they had a sort of a rubber covering, some say condom, around it. And this condom had two purposes. One is to minimize vibration, because if you have a really good guitar, you don't have to put a lot of tension on the neck to get the neck straight and to get it just right. So if there's not a lot of tension on the truss rod, it might vibrate a little in that channel. So that's one purpose, and the other purpose was that if they glue the top, or I mean the fingerboard onto the neck, the glue might sort of freeze the truss rod actually. So that's the rubber goes against that. So they didn't have any stuck truss rods. So what they changed is actually they made the truss rod thinner, and you would think, okay, then obviously you will have less of sustain and all sorts of characteristics that go along with that. But the trick is that they have two factors that make the truss rod better, because they leave more. The channel is thinner, so they leave more of the wood in the guitar or in the neck. And the second thing is that the anchors that they use, that are the contras for the truss rod that actually fix the guitar or the truss rod to the neck, are big brass bold anchors. And Edwin told me that this is actually the biggest difference in the sound. So it has more sustain and more tone because of that. So that is one of the biggest differences. Of course, there are more smaller differences that they made or that they followed up on in 2013, like the custom buckers, for instance, which is also a big difference. But the truss rod is actually the biggest difference. There is also, when we talk about necks, of course, a lot of people have different views. So now when I'm constantly presenting and talking about and showing this 1960 replica, a lot of people say, oh, this is a very comfortable neck, because if you're not used to bigger necks like 58, 59 necks, then you would instantly say, okay, this is very similar to my, let's say, Fender or Ibanez or whatever it is. So this is a comfortable neck. But is it also different? I mean, in tone. My personal opinion is that a fatter neck will give you more tone. That is a fact. But a well-made neck like this, with the right anchor, the right truss rod, leaving enough wood, of course, high quality wood, good frets, which is also, even how the frets are seated into the rosewood is very important to the sound, of course, as of course the transfer of tone through the neck. But the thing with this guitar is that it's very, very comfortable, still has a good sound. And we were talking to the guys at Gibson. I won't say who it was, but we were talking about how is it possible that some manufacturers have very, very thin necks and still these guitars are somewhat stable. Not as stable. If you've played a 58 or 59 Les Paul or a replica, this neck will hardly ever break. If you know the SGs from the 60s, these were extremely thin, like for instance an Ibanez neck, and they break all the time, especially because mahogany is softer than, for instance, maple. and a lot of a lot of current, like Fender neck will almost never break simply because it's maple. It's very hard wood. And so we were talking about these different necks, and I said, well, how is it possible that an Ibanez guitar doesn't break, you know, when you take it out of the case, because it's so thin? And they said, well, the reason for that is because Ibanez has a very large aluminium sort of gutter or channel that is actually the neck, and they have, you know, a little bit of wood around it just to, you know, just to give you a wooden feel. But the neck is actually the channel. So they call that the the Ibanez neck with some veneer on it. So that's a running gag anyway. Yeah, how do they age these guitars? I mean, it's a very interesting question. Of course, a lot of people think you buy a spray can and you use some cold material. You put the guitar maybe in an oven or in a very hot place, and then you cool it down very drastically, and you spray on, for instance, Freon or any other stuff like that. And the paint will crack, especially when it's a natural finish like cellulose. But when you do that, you will get a sort of a spider web, you know, weather checking that goes in all directions. But as you can see, these are not spider web weather checkings. These are simply mainly going in this direction. So they don't actually do this with Freon or any other cold substance. They actually do this with a small knife, very sharp knife. So you can see people, they have about 5 or 6 people doing that all the time at Gibson on these sort of models. And you see them actually working with a X-Acto type knife and making all these small cracks. It's very hard to believe, but I saw it with my own eyes. So this is how they do it. And this is also why it's so much work to create a guitar like that. So the aging is done by Edwin Wilson and his crew since the early Murphy guitars, 2002, 2003. The Gary Rossington was one of the first, I think the first signature model, which was very well aged. And since then, of course, this whole line of production has become very popular, because they look very convincing, more so than most other aging or aged guitars. And it's actually not well known that Edwin Wilson was involved with all these Murphy guitars. Actually, he did all the hardware. So if you look at an early Murphy aged guitar, you will know that Edwin Wilson did all the hardware on that. But he's too modest to want any sort of claim to fame for that. But he knows everything about Gibson guitars. It's simply amazing. I mean, it's an honor to work with a guy like that. Yeah, the production. Of course, they are making them right now, and now is early April. They just started on the 300 that will be made and will be distributed worldwide. We ordered 30 pieces. We have pre-sold quite a number, because the response when we actually launched the guitar at Frankfurt last month, it was really amazing. We had did a lot of interviews, and people were really amazed to be able to, you know, touch both guitars and compare them. That was a unique experience. So a lot of these guitars will come, and you can actually now compare these guitars here at Max Guitar. Of course, this will be, or no, that one will be stowed away. But if you make an appointment, we can sort of get it out and make sure that you see both guitars. So 30 pieces. They will be priced between 6,700 and 6,900, something like that, depending on exchange rates and things like that. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to come and check this guitar out, because it's it's really no bogus. Of course, there is a little marketing involved, but it's really one of the best Gibsons you can actually buy now, new, without, you know, spending or taking a second mortgage out on your house. It's really that good. Well, hopefully they will be arriving at the end of this month, probably between early May and 15th of May, something like that. And I'm looking forward to that. We'll have a nice event around that, probably second half of May. You are welcome.